Welcome to Raging Bullets, episode 340, Pop Culture and Whatnot. Welcome to Raging Bullet. I'm Sean Wigland, drnorge, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Jim, the superior sensei of the Whatnot, Segulin, and the Duke of You Know. Please take a look at our show notes, because we're talking about all kinds of books. We're going to be talking about all new X-Men, Saga, Jennifer Blood, Shadowman, Harbinger, Jennifer Blood, First Blood, Love and Capes, What to Expect, Superior Spider-Man. We do these Pop Culture and Whatnot episodes as a bonus show. Every fifth episode, we do one of these where we step outside of our normal DC podcast and just kind of talk about some things that we're interested in that fall outside of DC. And this one's all about comics. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network and the League of Comic Book Podcasts. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. DCBService.com is your comic book pre-order source, and be sure to be checking them out this week to see what amazing deals they're offering for February. I want to focus a majority of our ad this month, though, on InStockTrades.com, because we talk about a lot of books, and a lot of them I want to shout out. For example, the Invincible Ultimate Collection hardcovers that Jim's going to be talking about this episode. These are books that regularly go for $34.99. 45% off. InStock Trades is offering them for $19.24. That's a great way. It's like the one I'm looking at is Volume 3, for example. It collects Invincible issues 25 to 35 and a ton of extras. And I know, Jim, you love these volumes. It's 336 pages for $19.24. It's a great deal. Saga we talk about in this episode. This is Brian K. Vaughan, Fiona Staples. Collecting issues 1 through 6. $9.99 regularly, 45% off, only $5.49 for 6 issues. Means you're getting 6 issues for under $1 each. I mean, how can you miss that deal?
Wow.
Jennifer Blood by Garth Ennis. You mentioned that on this episode. This is the first trade paperback. 168 pages, $19.99 regularly, 30% off, only $13.99. Love and Capes by Tom Zoller, the first trade paperback. This one is $19.99 regularly, 30% off, only $13.99, 152 page count. Harbinger from Valiant, the ongoing series, Volume 1 trade paperbacks collected. This is the brand new series, 128 pages, $9.99 regularly, 30% off, only $6.99. So it's a great opportunity. We're talking about a lot of different books here that some of you might be interested in. This is a great chance to try, like the Harbinger one collects the first 5 issues. It's a great chance to try these titles at a price point that's affordable. So, you know, if you're like, I want to try 1 or 2 of these titles, like you mentioned, Jim, in trade, even if it's like a book that you're like, I can't fit into my budget to follow it ongoing or something like that, maybe try it out in a trade. You got a good trade that you can enjoy reading with a complete storyline. It's one of the cool things about trades that you can jump on, and that's the great thing for me about InStockTrades.com is that you can check out a lot of these titles and see what you want to go with if you're looking for that title, especially if you got one of those books that you're reading. I see sometimes a lot of people who are bitter about a direction of a title that they're reading, and they're just not enjoying it the way that they used to. That's a great chance to swap that title out and maybe use that spot to try out a couple of new books to fit something in that gets you that like pumped up geek out feeling that you get. Every week when I open my comic box, whether it's from DC, it's Valiant, Marvel, Image, you know, any of the wonderful independent comics that are out there like Love and Capes and things like that, every time I open my box, I'm excited about every title that's in my box that I read. That's really a feeling that I hope if there's one thing that people get out of this show is you get that feeling, and that's a great part about InStockTrades.com is you can go shop there. Orders of $50 or more give you free shipping. And I want to thank people like InStockTrades.com and DCBService.com for supporting our show and also providing amazing discounts on comic book material. James, what kind of a podcast are we?
Pop Culture and Whatnot, a division of Raging Bullets, is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into the comic books we are discussing on this show. So please check our show notes for the subject matter so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk a whole bunch of comics.
Nice work, Atom. What are these characters up to?
Jim, I've been looking forward to this. It's one of the things with doing these bonus shows that it provides us an opportunity of is to talk about some comics outside of DC. Because one of the things we've always said on the show is that we're comic fans. We're about promoting great comics. So I wanted to start off with the Valiant relaunch. And I had a tough time because I honestly, for anybody that's reading this, I'm sure you're in the same boat I'm in. I think this has been one of the best relaunches of a line around. So to pick one of the books was very hard for me. I picked Harbinger. And the reason why I picked Harbinger, it was funny, I was a big fan of the old Valiant. And one of the books that didn't fit into my budget consistently was Harbinger. So I didn't have... I want to be cautious in saying this. I didn't read enough of it to have a strong attachment to it. I read it in some crossovers and things like that. Always greatly enjoyed what I read. I just didn't have money in my budget to be able to pick it up. So this time around, it was a title I picked up at its launch. And 8 issues in, I've been really enjoying it. It's done by Joshua. It's Dysart. I know I'm going to butcher his last name, which is why I'm spelling it out, because I'm loving his writing. He did the writing of Unknown Soldier from Vertigo from DC. Remember that Unknown Soldier series we both really like so much? Lee Garbett on art, Moose Bauman doing colors. Take this guy, Toyo Harada, and he is this, he's part of this global foundation called Harbinger. But he's a telepath. He's like, imagine if Charles Xavier took over a company, was like this worldwide leader. He sought out other people like him with power potential and sought out to find ways to activate them. Some of the people will die. Quite a few of them will die, actually. Not afraid to break a bunch of eggs to make an omelet. Unfortunately, it's very rare that an omelet comes out. Back up a little bit. Our hero, our everyman of the story, is this guy named Peter Stanchek. Peter gets activated, actually activates on his own, is found by Harada, and it turns out Harada's seeking him to become a mentor to this guy in hopes of keeping him from becoming this deadly power. Think of it like a godlike Captain Atom-like power, or a Phoenix kind of power, or something like that. Dr. Doom or something, where it's this potential for this guy to cause mass destruction worldwide is there if he snaps. Harada has seen this from this sage, the bleeding monk. So he's seen this potential future where this guy, Peter Stanchek, just devours everything. His idea is to take him under his wing and guide him on the right path. Well, it turns out that Harada, he's this guy who doesn't have the moral code. And Peter starts to figure out that this guy's evil along the way. It's a very gray area as far as what Harada actually is. So when he figures all this out, he rebels. And here's how he figures it out. His best buddy, Joe, who has been on drugs and things like that, Harada has him killed. Has him killed for the purpose of breaking emotionally Peter so that he will rely more on Harada, if that makes sense. So seeing your friend die, your closest friend, your confidant, this guy who, he was going through some tough times. He was somebody that Peter could rely on. And Peter knew that this guy was, when he got better and all that, this guy was going to be here for him. This is his buddy. This is his running buddy. So this guy's death, Peter finds out Harada caused. Instead of pulling him closer to Harada, Peter now becomes a part of this renegade group. He starts this renegade group. Peter's powers, though, are mental manipulation. He has this girl who he's in love with. Now, what's the danger when there's this girl who you're in love with?
Oh, no.
who you've got mental powers, and she doesn't return the same feelings. He starts playing Puppet Master. Eventually, she gets freed from that. Obviously has no use for him, or so it seems. And that's part of the great thing about this story. There's a lot of gray areas where you think characters are going to react a certain way, then they react a different way. Harada's got his group that are hunting Peter. Now in this, there's Project Rising Spirit, which is this paramilitary group. They've found out about these weapons, these harbingers, these beings, these humans that have powers. And obviously they're thinking of them as potential military application. This is causing a crossover with one of the titles in the universe called Bloodshot, where Bloodshot is a paramilitary. And I'm not going to go crazy into Bloodshot on this one just because you don't really need to know a lot about him to understand the premise of Harbinger. But Peter and his crew are on the run from Harada's group and this Project Rising Spirit that are after them as well. Needless to say, Harada and Project Rising Spirit are also fighting each other and trying to outwit each other in the attempt to get Peter and his crew. Peter, though, has found out that he's got similar skills to Harada in the sense that actually beyond Harada, he can activate people with Harbinger-like powers without them dying. He did it on this girl who, it was this overweight girl who just seemed to be really down on herself. And I really liked her story because she was like this sweetheart who all of a sudden he activates and she goes all gung-ho, geek out superhero. Which she's the only one in the book that is convinced she's a superhero. Like, everybody else is just like a normal human on the run,
Yeah.
Worried about their life. She's like, I'm Zephyr, I'm a superhero. And she can fly. So, and she calls her Zephyr because, like a blimp and everything like that. She's great. She's like this endearing character that's on there. And when she came on, she was like this bright spot that was thrown into the book that I thought was really interesting. And he's running around with Chris, the ex-girlfriend who has like real issues with Peter still, but yet is seeing that he's trying to head down this new path. I don't want to say she's giving him a pass, because she's really not. She's starting to see that there's more to him than this evil person that manipulated her mentally. And this most recent issue, and I just want to shout out real quick issue 8 because how much I enjoyed it. There's this guy named John Torkelson who's introduced. This is a guy who can't use his legs. And his power is, and you don't know what his power is in the beginning. You see this guy going into a dreamlike state, and in his dreams, he is like this hero called Torque. And the only way I can explain it is, do you remember when there was He's a Man in the WWE? What was the wrestler's name that did that one? The Man's Man. I'm trying to think of the guy. William Regal.
Okay.
Remember when he first came over to the WWE and he
okay.
did that for that short stretch? This was what Torque has made himself out to be, because he is everything but feeling like that when he's stuck into his bed. So all of a sudden, he's gotten this persona going in his dreams. When Peter activates him, it turns out he can make whatever he imagines, or at least it seems like he can make what he has strong affinity for imagining a reality. Like, Torque becomes this shell that goes around him, and he's able to be Torque. So I don't know what the extent of his powers are. This is all we've seen of it so far, but it's this really cool thing when Peter activates him. But Peter activates him in the middle of them being hunted by both Harada's group and Project Rising Spirit. So imagine being activated, and now you're like thrown in the middle of all this stuff, barely knowing that's even a strong term. He just met Peter. So, who do you side with on this? You're all of a sudden got things because of circumstance, because Peter happened to come after you, you're now thrust into the middle of this. And that's what this series is. It's just really great. It's great writing. It's great character development. Every time a new character is introduced, Peter's development was great in the beginning, because I like that Peter, there's points where you don't like Peter at all. Like with what he did with his girlfriend Chris, you're like, oh, dude, that's just all kinds of creepy. You understand why he did it. I'm not saying you justify it by any stretch, but you see the humanity of what he did. But it's like a cautionary tale of power and how it can corrupt, and how he just, he made the wrong call, the wrong decision. Because seeing this girl now, you can't help but wonder, like, if he was just himself, if maybe she wouldn't have on her own over time fallen for him for real. But now it seems like, did he put the nail in the coffin to that, per se, forever? And I love that that's part of this whole story. And in the meantime, this bleeding monk that I mentioned, that Harada was using, has vanished. And he sees the futures, the possible futures that Harada has been using. So it'd be curious to see what happens as this series goes on. If Peter comes across him, or if Harada comes across him again, and what these events have meant towards that future that was laid out. It's a very smart series. A lot of stuff has happened in 8 issues. I'm glossing over it very quickly, but it's one of many examples of what I think is so great about what Valiant's doing right now. This is just a book I can't help but give a highest possible recommendation to. I have loved every single issue of it. It's made me want to go back and read the old Harbinger series, which is a whole other universe. So it's not connected with this. This is 8 issues in. You can jump on board right now, and you're not going to be lost at all, because it's all brand new, right from the ground floor. It doesn't touch on anything that's happened from the past, either when Valiant ran it or when Acclaim ran it, because Acclaim bought the properties years ago. So this is a fresh reboot. But what I really have loved about all of these books are, it really is clear they went back to the original Valiant themes, brought them to today without throwing out what made them cool. And that's a really important key and a really important balance. They feel very today, they feel very cool, they feel very current, they feel very real world, as much as they can with what I'm talking about. But I really am enjoying these books a great deal, and this is one of those that I wanted to shout out and just say it's just a really, really terrific title.
Yeah, I read one of the issues of that. I want to say it was issue 7 that I read. It was the intro of the one, what's her name, Flamingo character.
The one with the flames?
Yeah, the flame one.
Yeah.
And I get it. It was one of the. Yeah, I read one issue of it, and it made me want to continue reading, but go back and get the other stuff. That was something one issue in, and I'm jumping right into the middle of the story. So those some gaps. I was like, okay, who is this? What's going on here? But just the quality of the writing pulled me in enough that I wanted more. I wanted to go back. I want to see who these different people were. It was funny you mentioned Zephyr, because I was like, she seemed kind of cool, and I was like, okay, who is this kid who, on one hand, I was like, she shouldn't be in with this group because everybody else was really darker and grittier, and and she's just like, oh wow, she had this goody kind of air to her. And I was like, oh, okay, now I'm hearing you tell the story of her, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. I want to read that. I want to see more of that. So this is one I'm actually going to probably pursue, either maybe digital or figure out see about trades or whatnot on this.
They're doing a great trade program too. So I mean, you have a lot of options. Like, all the issues are available digitally. One of the things I'm doing the digital, I just did it because the first issue of Exo Manowar, which was the first launch title, it came out digitally and they had digital extras. So I went to DCB Service and just logged into my account and I did it digitally because I like afterwards. What they do is they give you like the pencil work after the issue, so you can kind of page through that when you're done. It's really cool stuff. So I like that kind of thing. But I'm sure you're going to get the same thing out of the trades. The single issues are all kinds of cool as well. It's funny, Exo Manowar I actually bought in paper and digital. And then I just wound up finding that I really liked the digital format. I liked reading it on my iPad, so that's the route I went with it. You can't go wrong either way. Their trade programs are awesome. They're trading everything as it goes along, so that's a good way to touch on these titles as well. So the great part is you have flexibility as a reader to go whatever route you want. I like that because I can't speak to that experience, because they were nice enough to put us on their press program. So I've been forwarding you their press releases just so, I figured if there was something you caught your eye and you touched on it, that you could jump on. I didn't know if you had a chance to read any of that, and I'm glad that you picked up in the middle, because it's great to have somebody pick up and say, hey, I picked up issue 7, and I was able to follow along with what was going on, and I liked it enough to, which is, I think, good for people that are wondering if there is a jump-on point without going to issue 1.
Oh, definitely. There was a quality story told, and it was a fun read. And I wanted more. I did want, at the end of it, I wanted more on that one. Same thing with that Shadowman. I was like, I dig that one because it had the supernatural type of freaky sort of mystic, demon fighting type of magic, and it's. Doing a terrible job explaining it, but
no, it's Jack Boniface, and you're not doing a bad job explaining it. That was kind of my first feeling whenever I read Shadowman. That was my favorite Valiant series of the old Valiant universe. Jack Boniface, bringing him into this new Valiant universe and modernizing him. I love the whole story with his parents. I don't know how much you read, but oh my gosh, I can't recommend that book enough, because it's 4 issues in now. 4 issues in now. This idea that there's a Shadowman legacy where they're stopping the dark, the voodoo, the supernatural from coming to this world. They're preventing it. He is the legacy holder because his father had that legacy of Shadowman. It was passed on to his son. And he snaps into this mode where when he's the Shadowman, he becomes something other than himself. And it's like a symbiotic relationship between him and the Shadowman. Very cool. I'm glad you had a chance to read that. What did you think? How did you read a whole issue of that, or what did you?
Yeah, actually, it was again another one where I've read one issue of it, and I wanted more. And it was another one where I was looking. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how I'm gonna add those two to the list. Again, I didn't know if I was gonna go digital. I was thinking maybe trade program. I definitely wasn't gonna do the traditional, paper comic. For the Valiant stuff, I was going to do something different, something I don't normally. That's why I was thinking digital, just because I normally don't do that. But I've been having issues with my computer, so I haven't gone and purchased or done anything, where I'm downloading stuff until I know for certain everything's good to go with my computer. So I'm kind of delaying myself in getting this stuff, but. The ones that I read, I was like, this is some good stuff. This is kind of interesting. And it was, again, that whole voodoo vibe to it. I was like, that for me, I was like, okay, this isn't it's not a clean hero. But he's definitely one of the good guys. He is fighting for the light, but there's going to be a little darkness mixed in with the light. You can't just be pure dun dun, oh, I'm Superman type of style to him. He's got a grit to him. He's got a little bit of edge. There's a little bit of an unknown. I like the comment you made about the symbiotic nature, and that was something I was kind of wondering if that was standard norm for this guy, for this character, or if this was new concepts being introduced for this relaunch.
They've taken it to a different level than the original, but that was a part of it. Like when he plopped on the mask. The cool thing about the old series was Jack Boniface was a jazz musician. He had his sax, and there was something it had this New Orleans theme. It was wicked cool. It was just something very different at the time. I like those kind of Batman-y, Daredevil, kind of gritty street-level characters, and that's what Shadowman was. But throw in the voodoo theme, which I've always been a big fan of since the Bond movie Live and Let Die. It just kind of got me into the whole New Orleans voodoo vibe and all that. So this had a lot of that. And Master Dark is like his enemy, and it looks like they're bringing this guy back into the new Valiant universe, and that's what Shadowman is. The quest is, and he doesn't know it, is to keep Dark from coming back to our world. And that's what a lot of these demons that you're seeing in the series so far are trying to bring about. And it's a really cool, that's a series that it's Justin Jordan and Patrick Zircher are the writers. Patrick Zircher on art, and it's Brian Reber on colors, and it's just the whole creative team is really great. His parents, it's this guy who was thrust into this world where his parents died. His dad died when he was being born, and his mom gave him up and left him only with this amulet that he didn't know anything about, not knowing that this amulet was keeping him hidden from all of this evil. Well, he finds out through doing research that his birth parents were criminals. He's outraged because he kind of developed in his mind what he wanted that all to be. So he throws away the amulet because he doesn't want anything to do with them. Well, you throw away the amulet, now all of a sudden you are visible to all of these supernatural evil that are coming after the next host of the Shadowman. And through that, he now has gotten in contact with these other two people who are, I would guess, they're on the good side of the supernatural, where they're trying to prevent all of this, but they have powers of their own, magical powers. They're kind of linked into that whole scene. It's kind of like, you ever seen the TV show Supernatural?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that thing with more magic thrown in, where these two people are those guys, and they're coming in now to kind of have Shadowman's back. And I'm oversimplifying their role, but they came in and they're doing this, and Shadowman, all of a sudden, out of the blue, is put in this life or death situation, and he zaps into Shadowman mode. Doesn't know what he's doing, but because it's a symbiotic host, the host kind of takes over. So as we're going on, he's learning more about his history, survives, obviously, that encounter, but he is very torn. Is this the life I want for myself? Because, as you know, and it's one of the things I love about this universe, they don't pull any punches. This is going to change you forever, and you're not going to have a quote-unquote normal life. You're being thrust into this voodoo world with all of these demons, and it's a very dangerous world. It's also a responsibility you have. If you're taking on the mantle of Shadowman, your responsibility is to put a stop to this stuff. I thought of you with this series because it reminds me a lot of when Angel spun off into his own series. What I really liked about that series, where Angel was this guy that was kind of getting rid of these threats. It was kind of his redemption. This isn't a redemption story for this guy as much as, but it's got the vibe of what I liked about Angel as a character, where this guy's very, very torn on what the right direction is. This leads to a potential situation where he's got to decide, am I going to be Shadowman? Am I not? And I'm not going to tell you who he encounters that helps him start to make the decision, but and as of the series so far, he hasn't made the decision yet. So I really love the direction this series is going. There's a lot of depth to it. And what I love about it is if you listen to that compared to what I was just talking about Harbinger, two very different books set in the same universe. They're very, very different styles, very, very different types of books. There's nothing homogenous to these titles. They're very different. So it'd be cool to see him eventually encounter the Harbingers, because very, very different worlds that they come from, and that's going to lead to, would they be friends, would they not, would he side with Harada, would he side with the kids, who and why, or would he be with that Project Rising Spirit, or would none of them, would this be a combustible element in the whole thing? I don't know. That's what I like about this world. There's reasons that when they eventually do meet each other, that you could see that there would be very different reasons for being on whatever side you're on. It's a great relaunch, and for people looking for something different, the Valiant Comics line, I just spoke about two of them. Thank you for bringing up Shadowman, actually, because I love the book. It's a great line that I can't recommend highly enough. Jim, you kids have been talking a lot. Why don't you give us a couple of the books that you wanted to shout out this episode?
Well, we're going to jump over to Dynamite.
Nice.
And go with Jennifer Blood. Now, Jennifer Blood was created by Garth Ennis, and it was originally the first couple story arcs were written by him, and that actually was what drew my attention to this, because it was this new. It's now on issue 21, and it was this new series that they were launching, and it was created by him. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like his stuff. And the initial premise of it, that I was reading, it was this average suburban housewife who's also killing mob. He was, and so I was thinking, okay, kind of like a Huntress or a Punisher type thing, but it's just this suburban housewife. And then as I started getting into it, you see, okay, it wasn't just this suburban housewife killing mobsters. She was a member of this family. These were her uncles, and they wronged her, and she's going for vengeance. So I'm like, okay, it's got like a Huntress theme. And I'm thinking, this is really kind of cool, because it had, the Garth Ennis style, and then writing, the creative writing team shift over. Al Ewing, Ewing is currently writing it, and he continued on just where everything started, and it was a beautiful flow through. But for me, the thing that impresses me the most about this series has been, in my head, I had one image, and I'm reading this, and I got this one image, and then as the story's evolving, you start learning more about this main character, you start learning more about her, and you start realizing she's not a Huntress. She's not a Punisher. She's flippin' lunatic. She's a serial killer. And I loved seeing it come up. I was like, oh my God, when I finally realized yes, she is killing really horrific people, but she keeps this journal. And you see how she's writing in the journal. And it's got that, oh, dearie me, kind of housewifey sort of thing. And then it's slowly shifting into just this monster. But it's a monster justifying what she's doing. Now, she's killed some horrific people, so you're going to say plus, that's good. But she's also killed some people who really don't deserve to die. Prime example, and, again, spoiler as we always do, her husband has this college sweetheart that was the true love of his life, who she really didn't want to get married. He wanted to marry, and so everything ended, and the guy kind of broke the heart. Well, the college sweetheart shows up back in the town. And, of course, immediately the husband's once again smitten. Well, it turns out the college sweetheart and her husband are swingers. And they kind of make him an offer, hey, why don't you join us? Let's, party, let's have some fun. Well, Jennifer finds out about this, and she handles it very rationally, very just understandably, and just, completely. I was actually kind of surprised. She only slit the guy's throat and burned her alive. She burned somebody alive just because they wanted to do some swinging. They wanted to do some partying. And in her little journal, she's justifying this because she's like, well, they're really sick and depraved people, and my husband is weak, so he would have eventually given in, even though he told them no. And to her, she sees absolutely nothing wrong with this. And I was sitting there, I'm like, I'm kind of laughing at just the horrificness of it. But then the writing goes into, and this is definitely a mature topic, both visually as well as storyline wise. They really go into explaining why being burned alive is very painful. It's not just burning your flesh and dying. It's you're inhaling the fire, you're inhaling the fuse, and you're burning from the inside out. It's an absolute horrific way to die. And they really make sure the reader understands exactly how nasty of a death this poor woman had, whose only crime that she committed was the fact that she wanted to sleep with her husband. She wanted to, they're partying and just, they had little quote-unquote perversions that Jennifer found, or Jessie, whichever her real name is, whichever you want to call her. I keep referring to her as Jennifer just because That's her persona when she's in the serial killer slash killer mode. But it's just this great stuff because you get this fun comedy stuff and you get these serious, nasty, mature moments, and then you get this story where, as it's slowly unfolding, you're seeing just how touched in the head she is. You're seeing the psychoticness, and you kind of understand some of the stuff she went through. She was in this crime family. Her father was murdered. Her mother was driven basically insane over everything that happened, was destroyed. And her perfect life that she would never have, she wants to have that perfect life, but she also wants her vengeance. So she's trying to have best of both worlds, and obviously everything just slowly starts crumbling. And as the story starts crumbling, as this perfect life she has starts crumbling, it opens a new door to a new chapter and a new development of the character and new twists and turns and swerves. I'm going to avoid a lot of swerves in there because there's constant, as you're going along, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. And there's some, oh wow, I didn't think they'd go that route with her. And it's something that I've really enjoyed about the process. And another kind I do have to talk about is visual styling. What they did was we have two, illustrators, arts and inks, working, one issue one works on, the other issue the other one works on. But their two art styles are so, they blend so well together that I'll be honest with you, I didn't realize it was a different artist from one issue to another until I actually sat down and focused and looked at the creative team. I had a kind of stockpiled a couple of these together, and I was reading through a bunch of them together, and you see this art, and this is some great working and artistic creative team. It's Keber, Kewber Ball, Baal, and Iman Casallos, Casallos. Each one will work on one issue. So, one work on the one, the next one will work on the other one, but to say you have two different artists working on the book, you wouldn't know it unless you actually went into the process thinking it's because their art style so matches and so blends so well together that I was like, this is some neat stuff. And coloring Inlight Studios, letter Rob Steen, and the cover artist Mike Mayhew. I just really I'm getting this great story, but I'm also getting something very visually pleasing. That's why I want to make sure all the creative team got mentioned here, just because, it was the initial story, it was the initial name that drew me in, but as the development of this character has gone on, that's what's keeping me interested. This is a title that I'm getting, the paper format, and I'm continuing getting the monthly format, and as it's coming out, I'm jumping to one of these titles, right along the top of my DC stuff. If I had to, start cutting stuff, there's actually a really good chance Jennifer Blood would survive, just because it's giving me something different than what I'm getting in my DC stuff. That I'm enjoying the contrast. I'm enjoying this other exploration.
I'd love to shout out something from Image if I could.
Oh yeah,
Saga. Saga's by Brian K. Vaughan, who you'd know from Ex Machina and Why the Last Man.
Yeah.
And Fiona Staples. And Saga, imagine there's two warring races. One's this race on Landfall where they're technologically advanced, and they've kind of crafted and honed that. Then you've got this other one where it's this moon that surrounds their planet, and the group that's on Landfall they're kind of like fairy-like in the sense they've got the fairy wings, that kind of thing. But the group that's on this planet this moon that kind of revolves around it, they are more in tune with magic and different things like that. They have very different philosophies at races, and they're at war. Now, they both want to decimate each other. The problem is, if you decimate the planet, the moon's done for. You decimate the moon, the planet's done for because of orbit changes and stuff like that, right? But yet, they hate each other so much as races, they don't care. This guy, Marco, from the moon, is taken as a prisoner of war, and the guard is this Alana. And she's, all of a sudden, through their interactions, and we're thrust into this, like, where the two of them are together as a couple. We don't know how they got together. We're just seeing flashbacks of the fact that they fell in love while he was a prisoner. We're getting to see little bits and pieces of it. It's kind of like what Arrow's doing and how we're kind of getting the backstory of him on the island.
Yeah.
We're getting their romantic backstory. I'm 9 issues into the series. I just reread it over the weekend just for fun. And the cool part is, not only do you have their two warring races, the fact that these two somehow found love and all that, he's got horns on his head, because that's part of what his culture has. She's got fairy wings, so they look very different, but somehow they found love in each other. And it was through this book that she was reading. It was like a romance novel about this troll-like creature falling in love with a woman. And, you know, she kind of like connected with the whole thing. And it opened her mind in a way that let her... I'm not saying that she instantly like goes, oh, I got to be with this guy. It didn't work that way. What happened was, I think it opened her mind to different possibilities, and through their interactions, they got to know each other and they fell in love. Well, there's all kinds of secrets that are revealed along the way. The two of them are hunted because she broke this guy out of prison, or, you know, that's what's being assumed, because nobody really knows what 100% happened. But here's the also thing, which is kind of like an abomination. She's pregnant, has a child. The child's the one narrating the story.
Oh, cool.
The artwork is incredible. It's very different than any style that you've seen elsewhere. It's very fantasy meets sci-fi meets modern storytelling. It's like a whole mix. I don't know the right way to describe it. It's very unique. And the cool part is, Fiona Staples, who's doing the artwork, she will sometimes do the lettering intermixed into the artwork. So it's got this really cool look to it. And it's just something very, very different, very, very unique. They're being hunted down because of this by both of their peoples, for obvious reasons. But also, bounty hunters have been hired, like this guy called the Will and his ex. And they're both, like, having this rivalry to meet the two of them. The Will, along the way, is not sure if he wants to pursue this or not. He goes to this planet. He's trying to get away from everything and kind of sort his head out and make a decision on what he wants to do. He's pursuing a lead. When he gets to this planet, it's like this pleasure planet where, like, people would, you know, go to, like, it's like a naughty Las Vegas, I guess you would say. When he gets there, and this is a guy, he's a bad guy in this. Like, it's really clear. He's a killer. He's a bad guy. And even the narrator, the girl who's the narrator, you know, the child, you know, really implies this is a bad guy, and that's not going to change. But even people like that have a line. When he shows up on this planet, they bring out this slave for him, and it turns out to be this 6-year-old girl. He's not going to go for that. And he's so angered by the whole thing that he decides to take action to free the girl. So you've got that side story going on. In the meantime, keep in mind, he's hunting our main characters who we're already in love with. We think they're great characters. So that's going on. Plus, they're being hunted by this group of people who are robots. They're sentient robots. They got TVs for heads. I'm not kidding you. They've got TVs for heads.
Nice.
And, you know, that's a lot of times where we see their expression in their TVs for heads. But they're robots. You know, their reference to their body parts and how they work and things like that are all that way. And they are a royal race, very regal. So, you know, the one character that's hunting them from that group is a prince. He's brought in because somebody else of the royal family died in pursuit of them. So you've got this whole little twist and turn going on. And again, their people are still hunting them as well. So it's this quest of theirs to try and, first of all, get away from everybody, to try and raise their child, to try and come up with a life together, all just because they fell in love. Her husband, the guy that she, you know, is married to, is trying to be a pacifist. But in the meantime, in defense of his wife, he's had to cross that line. In trying to save their family, they come across these people called the Horrors, which are ghosts. And one of the ghosts, in order to help them, to save one of them who almost dies, I'm not going to say who, has to bond with somebody in their party. Has to continue traveling with them from that point. And there's only one person this ghost can bond with. And you can use your own judgment to kind of let your head go where that might go. This ghost is like the coolest thing in the world. It's this little girl who was, her family was a terrorist family, and she was blown up in a landmine. So you only see you see her spectral form with the lower half of her body gone.
Wow.
Because she's been through there. And she's got like this great kid-like personality. Like she's, you know, a little bit older, obviously, than the baby. She's old enough to be like a babysitter or something like that because, you know, that's part of how she's referenced. But she's not an adult, so you get that kind of childlike whimsy brought into all this, if that makes sense. And it just works. Dude, I'm giving you all this info about this right now, and I'm barely touching on the surface of all the stuff that happened in 9 issues. They go looking for a rocket ship to get off the planet. It's in this tree garden. And the rocket ship's a tree, a living tree, that, like, shoots off into space. And, like, if the tree likes them, it'll go maybe a place where they want it to go. If not, they just kind of go where the tree wants to root itself. Terrific. In-laws show up and stuff like that, and that adds a whole little twist and turn, because how do the in-laws feel about all this? You don't know who to trust. And here's the thing, there's a back history of both these characters that we don't know, and they haven't necessarily had an opportunity to tell each other everything. And we as the readers are learning what they haven't revealed as they are. It's just terrific. It's only 9 issues in. Great book. I know after the first 6 issues they released a trade, and I believe that was $9.99. I'll actually do for our ad on this show some of the books that we're talking about here as a part of our ads, so that way people know where to get these titles. But Saga, I cannot recommend highly enough for its sheer quality. I hope I'm doing it justice here to kind of get people's appetite going. You mentioned with Jennifer Blood how you were noticing that series was very different than anything you're reading. Saga fills that gap for me, in the sense that I've been missing a Brian K. Vaughan fix. I was a huge fan of Why the Last Man, loved Ex Machina, and Why the Last Man in particular, out of the two of them, was the one that just blew me away. And I'm not taking anything away from Ex Machina. I loved Ex Machina too. But this has that kind of like, oh my God feel that I had. And I think the difference with Ex Machina is I didn't read Ex Machina from the beginning. Why the Last Man, I did. So I think when you have the ability to jump on something early in its journey, like this is only 9 issues in, so it's still early in its journey to jump on a board and be a part of something big. This has that kind of feel to it. And I think for readers who like said, Sean, what are you, nuts? I read Ex Machina since the beginning. That's exactly what I got from Ex Machina. You're right. I didn't have that experience because I jumped on Ex Machina late. So, and I loved everything that I read, but I didn't have the experience of going along for the ride. There's a letter column in the back where Brian K. Vaughan's speaking to you, and you really feel like you're going along on a ride as a part of this cool group of people that are into this Saga series. I really appreciate that feel to this. It feels like you're part of some secret club. There's something about that I just find neat. It's well crafted. I think the way the creators are crafting the series and bringing us in as readers, it's something that I'm really finding engaging, and it's something from Image that I just really wanted to shout out because I'm really digging every single issue of this, and it's just something a little different. And that's one of the fun things about comics is there's so many different avenues that comics can go, and I really like this vibe. What do you got?
Well, actually, I'm going to go back again to Dynamite, because with Jennifer Blood, they're doing something else along with that title and within that character. It's not within that title. It's his own separate series. It's called Jennifer Blood First Blood. The main series, Jennifer Blood, started off well within her mission as she was already established. She was already developing and doing her killing thing, and she actually had developed the Jennifer Blood persona. Jennifer Blood persona came about when she was killing these mob bosses, and she was leaving her calling card, and her calling card was Jennifer Blood, and she became the Jennifer Blood serial killer and all this type of story arc. But when she first started off, they never really showed her training. They never really showed where she came from, how she started. And that's what First Blood is doing. First Blood is telling more of the backstory. But it's not even just because I initially picked it up because, again, I was thinking, okay, it'd be a cool backstory, fill in some more gaps. But it's the written by Mike Carroll with illustrated by Igor Vittorini, Vitorino. Both of those two, they're creating a story that so feels like Jennifer Blood. It's a different writing style. It's a different writer, but it's that same style, that same feel, and that same vibe. So the neat little swerves I get, I'm getting a little bit even more. It's now the rest of the story behind stuff. So it even added to some of the swerves. And it came out, it's 3 issues in, so it came out after almost 20 issues of the regular Jennifer Blood, because some of the stuff that happens in First Blood will, spoil and or, tip the hands of some of the stuff you learn later on in the regular Jennifer Blood title. So it was a really neat way they handled this, where we got this wonderful story, and now we're getting a little bit extra, and it's a great add-on and an additional, addition to the whole, Jennifer Blood universe. Because, again, this is a character that I know where her head is now, but back here you're seeing just kind of the hints and the births of some of these ideas, just the basic concepts of what will eventually become her persona, what will eventually become that really, really cool psychotic person that I was like, man, this is amazing. And you see the glimpses of it here. You see the glimpses of it now. And it's something that I couldn't just talk about the one title without throwing out massive, love towards this one, just because the writer is really doing a great job of telling a younger version of Jennifer, but not making her, it makes perfect sense that this character will become this other character. And it's a great blending of the two. And, you get a full story of it. And I really got to just give kudos to Dynamite, how they did this, where we got this solid story continued on. We knew exactly where, as much as we would know where it was going. And then they introduced the backstory instead of going through flashbacks or doing, which they do flashbacks in the main title, but this is kind of a nice fleshing out of it and a great way of handling it. This was again, I like that universal type feel. Well, these two books feel very universal. They feel very connected. And it's, again, I really enjoyed this. This is something that, when First Blood came along, I was thinking one thing, and then I'm getting, a backstory, but then there's just that little bit more to it. There's that little bit extra that you're seeing, oh, okay, that's where that came from. Oh, and it's just, there was a lot of, oh my God, it wasn't as shock and awe, but there was still some, oh, that's kind of cool.
I want to shout out all new X-Men from Marvel. This is part of the Marvel Now, and it's 6 issues in. The creative team on it is Brian Michael Bendis on writing, Stuart Immonen on arts, and apologize for any name butchery, Wade Von Grabadger on inks, Marte Gracia on colors, VC's Corey Petit on letters. It's an incredible creative team. The premise of this one is, in the wake, and I'm going to be spoiling a little bit of what happened in Avengers versus X-Men here, because I can't really talk about this story without doing that, so I just want to shout that out real quick. The premise of that was they saw the Phoenix Force coming to Earth. Avengers freaked out because they're like, okay, this is the destruction of everything, because that's what happens when the Phoenix Force shows up. It destroys planets, brings just monumental destruction. But as Scott Summers points out, it's also a sign of rebirth. And he was looking at it as a sign of a miracle and hope for mutant kind, right? So he ends up getting the Phoenix power. And I'm going to kind of gloss over that because you can read the story to kind of see what ends up happening. Through being corrupted in that, as people know, I mean, you have to be under a rock if you're a Marvel fan and you don't realize Xavier's dead by Cyclops' hand. And you really got to read it in the story to see how that came about. Because of that, the Phoenix Force was dispersed in the storyline. This thing that Scarlet Witch put in place, no more mutants, has now been canceled out. Now, there is new mutant kind coming again. So, what used to be 200 mutants limited, now all of a sudden there's mutants sprouting out from everywhere. Well, here's the problem. Because of what's happened, there's 2 different mutant factions. There's Wolverine and the X-Men, who, are kind of on the traditional side of Charles Xavier's teachings and stuff like that. They've kept the school going and things like that. There's Cyclops, Magneto, and his crew that are taking over the Weapon X program area to start up their own school in the name of Charles Xavier. But this has the potential to be not only causing a war with mankind, but a mutant civil war. The Beast, who's with Wolverine and his crew, is going through another mutation, and this mutation is killing him. He experimented with himself a lot over the years due to his mutation, sometimes trying to accelerate it to give him, to move himself forward in his evolutionary cycle, other cases trying to cure himself. Because of his tampering, he's now in a position where he's going to die, and die soon. He doesn't believe in a heaven or an afterlife or anything like that. He believes you're done. Like, when this is it, you're worm food. Whatever mark you make here is it. So he's seeing what happened with Cyclops and everything and seeing this opportunity, saying, I can't leave the world like this. If I'm going to have a last act, I've got to do something to set this in motion to try and put things right. Iceman, in passing, makes this comment about, wouldn't it be great if the young Scott Summers that we first met, that guy with those morals and those, the untarnished guy who hasn't been through everything that the X-Men have been through. And this is where continuity works great, because all of the years of every crazy thing the X-Men have gone through exists here. What if he could talk to Scott Summers? What if he could see what he would become? What if Scott could see his younger self and see how far he had fallen? What would this do? Well, Beast is like desperate at this point. What else can I do? He brings them here.
Oh, no.
This is a world with Reed Richards technology and things like that. So he's taken time travel technology that's been in place in the Marvel Universe, done his own little tweaks to it, so it has a different, it's a safer effect and a safer travel. He brings the whole original team present day. One of the great things about this series is I read all that old material. It feels like those characters being thrust into our modern world. Here's the thing, though. As with any danger of tampering with time, you now start to change things. Jean Grey, who started off as just a telekinetic and eventually developed, the ability to read minds and telepathy and stuff like that, is, because of the shock of everything, is jump-started to become a telepath now. Reading minds, she has now discovered everything that happened to her. Also has discovered the truth of everything that Cyclops has done. So because of that, her relationship now with Scott Summers, to say that it's strained, would be a gross understatement of what's going on. They have to make the decision here. Like, they've come to present day. Scott Summers has seen them. Beast has seen them. Beast who's dying. Beast goes into cardiac arrest. He's dying, through this whole scenario. So needless to say, you see yourself dying. What do? You want to save yourself, right?
Yeah.
He starts to do that, and thank goodness that the Beast was there in spoilery, because I'm talking about issues 1 through 6, and this will be in our spoiler warning in the beginning anyway, because I don't want to ruin anything for anybody. Beast winds up seeing something in the formulas that Beast was working on that his older self couldn't see. Sometimes how you kind of go back and you kind of see that obvious thing in front of you because you don't have a lot of the baggage. Well, that's what happened here. And that's what's great about this. Like, everything makes sense. You can say, I get why he saw it. He doesn't have the baggage the other guy has. He doesn't have the years of looking at this stuff that the other guy has. So he's seeing something objectively that's like right in the place, ends up saving himself, goes through another stage, his modern-day self goes through another stage of evolution, which was really cool. So it's this really awesome book of this. This crew now is faced with a horrible decision. As a team, they have to make a decision. Do they go back to the past, or do they stay in present day? Wolverine and the crew are all for throwing them to the past.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you've got to get out of here. They're staying there. Every day they stay there, there's a risk of what happens if one of them dies? What happens if they go back and they remember things from this and they're changed forever? How long can they really stay there? Their premise is if they go back, they know what's going to happen. And this has been since the first issue of Premise of the series. If Xavier, and this is why Hank didn't go to Xavier at first, if Xavier knew what Hank was doing, he would have wiped Hank's mind of this. He would have wiped the X-Men's mind of it, and the original X-Men, sent Hank back packing to the present day, and made sure this didn't happen again. Because Xavier would have been all about protecting the time stream.
Yeah.
Because that's what Xavier would have done. They don't want the ones of them who don't want to go, like Scott and Jean, obviously, for obvious reasons, don't want to go back because they want to make sure that this future is corrected or that they can stop it or, all of it, because they don't want this to be their future. They both have very different stakes on the reasons why they want to do this. Obvious reasons, Jean's seeing that she's no longer with anybody. She's no longer there. And that's happened multiple times with her. She sees an X-Men where the school is being run by a guy with claws. That's the headmaster. The team is teamed up, Scott Summers is teamed up with Magneto and Emma Frost. So she's seeing this, in her eyes, a very, very dark world, and she wants to see what she can do to change it. You're already seeing a splintering of the original team through this, because when they go to vote, everyone on the team votes to stay, except for Angel. And Angel's like, we got to go back. We don't belong here. There's no reason to be a part of this. He's outvoted. They end up staying. We've got Iceman, who has a problem with his other younger self being there. We've got Beast, who's there for obvious reasons, in the sense that to save himself and also to... He sees, like, he started this whole thing. I don't know that Beast would have necessarily voted the way that he did, except for the fact that he feels, his younger self feels that he's responsible for all this. Because his older blue self brought them there. So he's kind of like got to vote that way because of it. But then you've got Jean and Scott, who... Scott, obviously, tremendous amount of guilt, awe, shock. Imagine if you find out you're that guy. This destructive element that you become. How do you face that? He goes running off. Not running off in the sense like a crybaby or anything like that. He goes running off, I think, in his own way to try and find and make sense of all this. What does he take? Wolverine's cycle. And you know where that's going to go, right?
Yeah.
Two of them who, obviously, Wolverine hates Cyclops at this stage. So now you've got the younger version of Cyclops, and, the two of them have got to confront each other. Wolverine's trying to hold it together, but his feelings for Cyclops, the older Cyclops, are so vicious. It just leads to this great sense of moments between them. And there's certain things I'm going to gloss over in this just because, I don't want to go too heavy into it. Kitty Pryde, though, she's a headmaster at the school in Wolverine and the X-Men. She takes a back seat in that role in order to become kind of the liaison for the original X-Men in this world. She's like, if you're staying, you're going to need somebody here who's a veteran, who can help you, who can coordinate with you, train you, help you through some of the difficulties you've got. Kitty becomes that person, kind of like their new Professor X. They even call her Professor K, kidding around, which is kind of cool to see Kitty Pryde, who was so long ago in history, Sprite, she was that person. Now she's taking them she's being in the mentor role. I think it's great. The voice, though, that Bendis has found of the original team, I think is the key. They feel like fish out of water, but they also feel like they are those characters being brought to modern day, and that's critical in this series. There is a familiarity in this. I have been reading the X-Men events since we've been doing this podcast for the last 7 years in trade and hardcover because I haven't been able to always keep up with everything monthly on that end. There's been different times where I've jumped back in monthly on the titles, but it's been very hard for me to keep up with it because of it. This series, oh my God, I could not stop reading. I ended up stockpiling the first couple issues, like through 1 through 3, just because of the show. I didn't have time to get to it. When I started reading them, I've read each of these issues 3 times. It's a terrific series. It's to me, it's one of the cool new series that I'm really, really enjoying. This is how you take time travel, bring it into modern day, make it work. This is exactly what I love about time travel storylines, when you've got characters meeting themselves, but also dealing with years of things that have happened to themselves, atrocities, decisions that they've made that they can't, even in that speed, they can't put into context to everything that's going on around them. It's amazingly cool, and it's a very accessible series. I didn't need to have a ton of backstory to really enjoy this. It's just in the sense I'm an X-Men fan, really, really dug this, and it's really accessible on the ground floor. So issues 1 through 6 I've read. The series does not let up. Wait, and I should add, remember how I mentioned that genetic kickstart of the New Mutants? Mm-hmm. There's already 2 New Mutants being brought into this series because of that genetic kickstart. They're being thrust in the middle of this. You've got really different factions going there. Cyclops, really publicly is considered a terrorist, and they know that. So who do they side with? Do they go Cyclops' route, who's trying to connect with them and make right? Or do they go Wolverine's route? And how are the all-new X-Men, the all-new old X-Men going to react to all this? I don't know. It adds a lot of questions. Really unique stuff, and this is just great material that makes a good use of continuity by bringing in these characters. It feels like you're relaunching these characters into the modern world without getting rid of anything, and it's a neat way to do it. So it's just something different. It's a little bit of a twist, but I would recommend this for any X-Men fan.
Yeah, see, now I want to pick that up. I've been avoiding the X stuff. I've been avoiding all the X books and just not getting. Now I'm hearing you talk. I'm like, oh, right, maybe I'll get the trade on that. Maybe I'll start getting more of that because that is some neat stuff with the X universe, and I'm glad to see they're using the whole universe and just the little tweaks on it. And as soon as you mentioned that they're bringing the younger versions of themselves to the future, I was like, oh boy, that's just going to give you so many areas where the best of intentions can go just horribly wrong, which is a common reoccurring theme a lot of times with some of the great X titles and the X stories, where these are good people, these are honorable people who just, for whatever reason, just something goes bad, something goes wrong, one little bit here, people misconstrue or misinterpret or whatnot, and I'm just that's something I think I'm probably going to be reading some X's again, which I hope this doesn't pull me back into that universe, because I already got one full universe. I don't need another one.
Well, you know what? I got to be honest with you, for being honest about all new X-Men 1 through 6, I don't feel like I need to be reading anything else. Like, it's a very contained book. everything I mentioned about, even with Avengers versus X-Men, they have that splash page in the front that kind of fills you in on everything you need to know, and they do that every month. So I really like that. Valiant does that too in their books. You know, that kind of like little reminder about what's been happening in the series. I'm a fan of those pages. I don't know if you dig those, but I like when a series just kind of gives you like 3 paragraphs or just quick little overview. Here's what happened. This series kicked off, the all-new X-Men kicked off with just like a quick little 1-page, you know, three paragraph-ish overview of what's been going on in the X-Men universe. So all that stuff that I mentioned, you didn't need to read Avengers versus X-Men in order to get that. That was right on the first page of All New X-Men. You don't need to be reading anything else. In the first 6 issues in, I have not once felt like I needed to be reading another Marvel title to get everything I needed out of this series. And I hope that continues, because I think that that's one of the things I'm really enjoying about the book is it's a nice contained piece. It's a lot of what I'm liking with DC's books that, like, you know, your Green Lantern books, mention those, how, you know, it's great to be able to read the main Green Lantern title and not have to worry about what's going on in Core. But if you're reading Core, you feel like you're getting something a little bit more. This has got that vibe to me where I know there's a lot of stuff going on in the other books. I'm interested in dabbling, but I don't feel like this overwhelming need. I'm interested in dabbling because I'm enjoying what I'm reading in All New X-Men. I don't feel like I have to read more of this material because I'm being forced, if that makes sense. And I'm a bigger fan of that, and I hope comic companies really start taking notice that if you're delivering quality material, readers will dabble on their own because it's quality material and they want to know more. If you force us to do it, then you kind of shy you people away, because you can say, like, okay, I'm digging All New X-Men. I'd kind of like to read Wolverine in the X-Men now just to see what's going on at the school. You know, if you want to go that route. On the other hand, if you want to stay just contained to this book, you can do it. 6 issues in, there's been nothing I've needed to read outside of it. I've read it twice now. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. There was no gaps. The pages in the beginning give me all the info I need. I really am a fan of that delivery. So it's just a great title. So I wouldn't feel like, you know, you have to shy away from it because of that.
I got to give a shout out to something, and it's a title we've talked about on the series before, but I just really, once again, got to bring up Love and Capes.
Oh my God, I have that as one of mine too. Go for it.
It's over on, right now, IDW, and for those who don't know, the basic premise behind Love and Capes is the main characters are Mark and Abby. Now, Mark is the Crusader. He is a Superman-style hero, champion of Deco City. Abby is when the series first started off, girlfriend, now his wife, and the series is about relationships within the superhero universe. It's a comedy. But they do give some really cool, serious moments that would affect in the super universe. But there are a lot of inside jokes that we as comic book readers would really appreciate and enjoy, and have fun with it. And one of the things that I love about this series is the fact that it's about their relationship. It's about these two people. Mark's an accountant. Well, he's an accountant who also has these superhuman powers, who fights crime. Abby owns and runs this bookstore, so she's just this down-to-earth, really cool, strong character, strong-willed person to be able to deal with all the craziness of having a husband who is this mega superhero. And I find myself with this title referring to them more as Mark and Abby, not Crusader. He is this hero, and that is, but I see him as Mark. Whereas a lot of times, like when I'm talking the Bat titles, I'm calling Batman, Nightwing, Red Robin, or Superman, I'm calling him Superman. And sometimes I talk about how, it's really cool, we got a great Clark issue. With this, we get some great Mark issues where there's some, really neat Crusader stuff that happens, and it's it's not just about them; it's about their full supporting cast. Well, we've got the 6-issue series. It's What to Expect,
so
where they are actually having a kid now. So we have this side story relationship, but now they're going to have a baby. So now they're going to have a super baby. What's going to happen? What's the little variations and the little introductions going to happen in that? And this has been just a great add-on to the other stuff that we've gotten in all the previous Love and Cape stories. And it's this is one of those things where it's written and art by Tom Zoller, who is just, he's a wonderful guy, and it's just a fun story. But I never want to. I always caution myself on fun, because people may think it's not a serious story, but there is serious moments. There's some great hero insight and just these great human moments, but there's some funny moments out right along blended in with it. And I gotta tell you, this has been one of those, anytime there's a Love and Capes thing, I'm jumping on it immediately. He has, free viewables on his website that I just, I'm not going to I'm getting the book. I'm paying the money for this comic because it's worth it to me. I could read stuff for free, or I could just wait and I can just get my monthly fix, and it comes together. I know this is going to be traded. When it's traded, I'm probably going to pick up the trade again just for rereadability, because I do like having everything together with these stories, because this is something that when you sit from read 1 to 6 in a row, it really adds to your enjoyment of it. This has been just a true treat and a joy.
One of the things I want to shout out about this series, too, with what to expect, for anybody that's interested in, a real, superhero situation comedy about what it would be like for a husband and wife to have a child when it's somebody with Superman-like powers. That's what this story is. You don't need to have read any of Love and Capes beforehand in order to appreciate this miniseries. And again, right in the beginning, he gives you kind of a what's been happening so far. This is a very contained miniseries where you kind of go through almost real time with the countdown to having the baby with them. And I really am enjoying that aspect of it. The concerns of what that would do to a human woman and how they go and deal with that. Also trying to fit this into real life without people discovering who Mark really is. The dealings with family, because I love that the family, with various things that they know about this, become an issue that they have to worry about. But one thing I also love, not only is Abby having worries, but Mark in his role as the Crusader. How can I be a good dad while being the Crusader? I love his relationship with Darkblade, where Darkblade's like the Batman kind of character, but he becomes the confidant, and he's giving Mark great advice on what to do, and he's also giving Mark kind of like slap to the face, like saying, hey, you got to understand, dude, you're in this role as the Crusader. You are going to be at times a part-time dad, and you have to learn how to resolve that with yourself, and you and Abby have to be open about those discussions and learning how to deal with this. And I really like that as a couple, we see Mark and Abby start having real discussions about their fears. I think this is a great book for anybody in a relationship, because the great part about it is they deal with conversations that people should have in every relationship. And now I'm not just talking about having kids, I'm talking about anything that you should be discussing in any relationship. So this would be good for people who are in a relationship, who aren't in a relationship, who are thinking about that they'd like to someday have a relationship. It's a great book with that, because their relationship, as you mentioned, is such a focus of this series. I love the ex-girlfriend Amazonia, who is the Wonder Woman archetype, is in this. It's a great series. I think for a DC fan, this is a great series. Marvel fan, this is a great series. There's a lot to love if you are a comic fan in general. There's a lot, I think, that you can connect with, because I see parts of Captain America and Mark and stuff like that as well. Some parts of Daredevil, and so it's one of the great things that I don't think you can pin down these characters as just being one type of character. You can see a lot of what's great about traditional superheroes in these characters, and seeing them reacting this in a real world situation. I read these titles, Love and Capes, over and over again. This year, I gave to some of my friends who aren't really comic fans. I sent this book, and because I wanted to give something, cause I'll be honest, I do a lot of gift cards for friends of mine that tend to buy a lot of things that they normally like, because I never know what to get them. So in the case of this one, I felt it was a pretty safe give. So I ended up giving it to a couple of my friends who I'm like, I'd love to give them something comic book related, but I wanted something that's accessible. I think this is something for anybody that watches television sitcoms. This is a great book to give them, because I don't think you have to be a superhero comic book fan to enjoy this. I think you can be a situation comedy fan and really dig this. So I think this appeals to a wide variety of audiences, and it makes a great gift. And I'm only saying that, Tom's a local guy, but I got to be honest with you, I'm saying it because his material is great. I first got turned on to Tom's work years ago at a Mid-Ohio Con before it was owned by Wizard. Tom was emceeing one of the panels, And what I appreciated was the person who was going to be on the panel was running a little bit late, and because they were doing signings, you know how that goes. Well, Tom was rather than just sitting up there, he was entertaining the audience and telling stories and stuff. Then he mentioned that he had a book partway through it, and it was just in passing. It was a book called Raider. And, I ended up going to his table later. I just said, hey, I really enjoyed you at that panel. Can you tell me a little bit about Raider? And this was like, a childhood character that he ended up creating and ended up making the series of. Well, after Raider, he created Love and Capes. And Love and Capes has just been a pure joy. We actually used to, on our old website, when it had like a web link to it, we used to host it on our website, because what he did was, it was a print comic first, which I didn't realize. I thought the web comic came first. I didn't know that. The print comic came first, and then he put, as you mentioned, parts of it on his website. There used to be downloadable code. There might still be for people to post on their websites. But kind of like you, I kind of went to, it's all about the print. I like, that material. I get it in digital, honestly. It's another one that I grab on my iPad, because I find that I'll read it, and, I'll delete, as I do with any of the comics that I download digitally. I'll delete them when I'm done reading them. I find that I keep throwing Love and Capes back on there just to go through and read, because it's you don't have to read it cover to cover every time you read it. You can go through and read just a few pages. Because of the way that it's crafted, there's times where you can read sections of it and it reads like Sunday comic strips.
Yeah.
But then the whole thing has an overarching story in the issue. I think the style that Tom Zoller crafts this is brilliant, because I think you can really... there's been times where I've read issues cover to cover of this. No problem at all. There's been other times where I'm just kind of like, you know what? I feel like reading Love and Capes for a little bit. Before I go to bed, I'm really tired. I just read another comic, or I've read a novel or something like that. I'm like, I want to read a little Love and Capes. I'll read a couple pages, just enjoy it, leave off where I left off, come back and read a little bit more later, because it reads like Sunday funnies too. So it works on the single issue level. It works on a individual panel level. It works on a lot of different levels. It's very well crafted. It's a unique book. We've been mentioning unique books a lot on this. My love for this series, though, has been since it originally launched, and just really my love for Tom's work has been, just something we've mentioned it on the show various times, but we never really had a chance to do this with it. And it's one of the things that I really like about these little quote-unquote bonus shows, is we get a chance to really shout out something like this that we passionately love, and this is a series. I don't know why I didn't expect that you would go to this title. I should have expected you to go to this title. I love that you and I didn't know what we were going to do, and then you threw this one out there, because I'm like, this is one of the ones I was going to throw out too. That's really cool. So it's a great title. I echo everything that you said about it. I think it's a great book. And if you're not reading this, you really need to do yourself a favor. What to Expect's a great jumping on point, but you can also get... it's collected in trades, the first 2 volumes, and you can definitely go pick those up from IDW. They collected them in trade, so it's traded, it's available. Go that route. It's available digitally on Comixology. You can get them on the apps. The single issues are available, so don't be afraid to go get them. It's a great book, and the website to go to is loveandcapes.com. So it's all one word, loveandcapes.com. And go and grab this book. I can't recommend it enough. It's just a really great title. Jim, one of the ones I want to talk about, if I could, I'm trying to remember whose turn it is, but I want to make sure we don't go without talking about the Superior Spider-Man. This is Doc Ock as Spidey. And I kind of want to shout this out, because I've read the first 2 issues of it. What did you say you thought was going to happen with Peter when you and I were talking? You threw something out there. Do you remember what you said?
No, I don't.
Maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was Daryl Taylor I was talking to then. Maybe it was Daryl. I don't know if you... Maybe it was Daryl Taylor. I might shout it out then. Doc Ock is taken over as Spider-Man. And what happened was, because of this, Peter Parker died in Doc Ock's body. But he was trying to get back into his own body using the memory transfer machine that happened. So what happened when he did that, his memories flooded into Doc Ock. And Doc Ock now has been influenced by them. And he wants to become... He understands why Peter has this great power comes great responsibility thing. He wants to be the better Spider-Man. He wants to be the quote-unquote superior Spider-Man. Well, he goes ahead and goes this route and does all this. And there's times where it's written by Dan Slott, Ryan Stegman on art, Edgar Delgado color art, VC's Chris Eliopoulos on letters, and I apologize for that. And it's just really just a cool book because we're seeing Doc Ock embrace Peter Parker's life, try to live his life better than Peter did. The cool part is he'll fight like the new Sinister Six, which is the Shocker, and a lot of characters that you've seen before, like Speed Demon and stuff like that. But we've got a Doc Ock who's coming in, and he's a more violent Spider-Man. He's got like these sharp talons on the end of his spider gloves. They're not like overdone. It's more like that there's fingers on his that have little points on them. So, from a distance, he looks like the normal Spider-Man. Up close, he's cutting through your outfit. And the villains are noticing this. Like, wait, whoa, Spidey doesn't do that. And he'll react to certain situations where, like, the Secret Six is overtaking him. The way that Spider-Man would get beatdowns, but yet Petey would find a way to persevere and fight on. Doc Ock's swinging away going, why would he subject himself to this? It's great because
nice.
It's clear that, but then he'll find himself coming back and trying, he'll save a police officer that's about to be attacked by the Sinister Six. And he's like, why did I just do that? So there's certain things that are happening to himself that he can't explain as it's going on. It's really, really great. Well, the end of the first issue has a big reveal, and that's, I'm glad that we do spoiler warnings here because I want to talk about this. He goes he's beating down one of the members of the Sinister Six. He goes to, it looks like he was going to kill the guy. Peter Parker, the specter of Peter Parker, grabs his arm and stops him.
Nice.
Doc Ock is not aware of him, but apparently he's in there too.
Oh, cool. Well, that is neat. So
he's not dead, or I guess not. He's like, I don't know if this is the real Peter. I'm guessing it's the real Peter. But, the other possibilities is the manifestation from Doc Ock. But Doc Ock isn't aware that he's there. He's, saying, he's watching all of this that Doc Ock's doing. And the second issue especially is, commenting on it. But, he's bound and determined to get his body back, to get his life back from this guy who's taken it from him. And yet, how do you do that when you're in this position? I love it. It's really, really great writing. I'm really enjoying the character. I haven't been reading Spider-Man consistently in a while. It's been more in Marvel's crossover events and stuff. I grew up being a huge Spidey fan. Marvel Team Up was one of the books that really brought me to the dance before I was reading X-Men and stuff like that. I was reading, the 60s Spider-Man, that old cartoon. That was as important to me as the Batman 60s show. So Marvel Team Up as a kid growing up was a terrific book that I loved reading because it was my buddy Spidey from the Electric Company and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and all kinds of stuff like that teamed up with all of the Marvel heroes, different ones every month. It's a great title. I particularly remember a 2-part Iron Fist crossover that I loved. So this, for me, is bringing back that excitement to Spider-Man. I don't know if people who've been reading Spider-Man are digging this storyline. I am. I think it's really cool. It's got me back and engaged. I'm on board for this. I am going to keep reading this title. 2 issues in, you got Doc Ock trying to date Mary Jane. And Mary Jane kind of, having, she has feelings for Peter Parker still. And, now Peter's making the moves on her. And in a way where Doc Ock's noticing things about Mary Jane that make you feel a little creepy sitting there too, it's because it's Doc Ock, and he's reacting in a way that Peter wouldn't. I'm really loving the direction of this series, but Doc Ock's again faced with Peter's morality speaking to him. It's really an interesting approach to this character. It's engaging seeing Doc Ock as a scientist. He's become Peter Parker the scientist now. When people at the company that Peter was working for are questioning what he's doing because he's creating things that could have military application, he immediately, and this is brilliant Doc Ock, shows them the practical, healthy, look what we're doing for society, how we're advancing things, application, nice. And shuts them down immediately. Old friends who were close confidants of Peter's who had worked with him, and I don't know, I got to admit, I'm going into a lot of this blind, where, Peter was working as a scientist and he had these lab assistants buddies of his, who were probably his equals at the time. They were, they are all of a sudden being shut out by new Peter and not realizing that it's new Peter. So it's an interesting direction for the series. I'm jumping on as a new reader. I don't have a lot of backstory. I read, I heard the buzz about the final issue of Amazing Spider-Man. So I read that and then the lead up from Avenging Spider-Man. That's all I've read going into this series. I don't need to have read any of that for Superior Spider-Man, though, because the first 2 issues when I read this, again, they had that nice little opening that fills you in on everything. It's just it's an interesting Spider-Man story. It's a cool little direction for the whole thing. And I hope Spider-Man fans are digging it, because this brought me back. I haven't been reading Spidey in a while, and I think it's really cool. So Dan Slott, home run. I love the direction of this series, and I'm curious to see more. So it's a great book, and one that I'd recommend.
Cool. That actually sounds kind of neat. Again, you're talking more Marvel stuff, and I don't want to get more Marvel. I don't want to be pulled into that universe.
You know what, though? I'm not reading the whole...
some cool stuff, man.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Because you keep bringing that up, and I actually think it's one of the cool things is I had the same concerns, and I was really like, my attitude was like, if I have to go jump in and start picking up a whole bunch of titles because I'm forced to, I'm not going to do it because I can't. Because, of the podcast that we do. I'm real committed to our show. I also am really liking the DC titles that I'm reading. So this isn't making me go, oh, DC stinks or anything like that. I love DC. Growing up, I've always been a DC Marvel fan. I've also loved independent comics. So I love being able to do a show like this where I can show that, I adore everything that we say on the DC show. 110% I stand behind. And I love that we've been doing this podcast and I'm reading some of the smaller DC characters I never would have had the opportunity to read before. Digging all of that stuff. But the cool part is now I'm dabbling a little bit in some things that I haven't touched on in a while. There's some Marvel titles that I haven't touched on this episode that I'm reading that I'm enjoying that we'll do maybe on another follow-up show to this. There's a lot of books outside of the DC universe, outside of DC's publishing, that'd be fun to do on these as the year goes on, if we have, when we decide to visit this type of thing again. But I don't feel with either of the 2 titles I mentioned, I picked them on purpose. Because one of the things that I really loved about them was I didn't feel like I needed anything else to be reading these 2 books. I felt like they gave me everything I needed right in both of these books. So for a fan that has the concerns you mentioned, I was figuring you would say something like that. And that's what I like about them. Because for me, a lot of times I stockpile Marvel titles. Not because I don't like them. Very similar to the other books I mentioned on this. Because we're doing this podcast, things that are outside of DC, when I get on a show-focused episode, like we're doing Green Lantern next week, which means everything gets put aside except Green Lantern. I'm going to be heavy focused on preparing for that episode. So because of that, I'm not going to be reading other titles. They got to be set aside for now. These are books that I'm enjoying because I can stockpile them, read 6 issues of All New X-Men. I don't have to read any other title. I got a complete story. I'm really digging what's going on. I'm not missing anything from like 3 other books. Superior Spider-Man is the same thing for the first 2 issues. I didn't need anything else. That's what I'm liking about both books. So I'd recommend them for anybody who's in your position that's looking for those titles that I don't have to be reading 27 books in order to follow what's going on. I can just read one title and just really get something satisfying. Is there anything else you got?
Well, it's another title that I know we've talked about, and I always sat out the conversations because I never read it. And it's Image Comics Invincible.
Ooh, nice.
I've picked up and I've read I think you bought the Ultimate Collections for me. I've read Volume 1 and Volume 2 now of Invincible, and I gotta tell you, this is an absolute wonderful series that I was sitting there and I'm like, man, I wish I'd read this before, because this has been just a great title. It's written by Robert Kirkman, art by Ryan Ottley, as well as Corey Walker. Colorist Rob Crabtree, and letters Russ Wooten. And the basic premise behind this is we're getting this look into, again, another look into the superhero universe told from the eyes of a young legacy hero. Invincible's father is Omni-Man, this great mega defender of Earth, an alien from another planet who comes to the planet and is this great champion hero. And you kind of find out later that's not sort of the case with his people. His people aren't these great enlightened race that's going to help and try to save the universe. They're in fact people who are conquering the universe. They're not the good guys. And we get through, and it's throughout the first volume, you don't really see this until the end of Volume 1, which is a massive collection of, I think it's almost 12 issues or so, within this first volume. so you're introduced to this character and you get this connection with him. And I immediately, because of the love of Superman, I was like, this guy is great. I'm loving this. This is, Superman, as if Superman had a kid. What's this going to be like? Father and son fighting together. No, completely turn it around on you now. And Invincible's given the difficult choice of, does he choose his father and his people's way, or does he choose Earth? He is born and raised on Earth. This is the life he knows. These are the people he knows. Does he become a conqueror, or does he become a champion for the innocent? And does he stay as a hero? And as he's dealing with that, you have these real-world situations of this kid graduating high school, going on to college, his mother dealing with ramifications of finding out her husband is just this evil, nasty guy who, has killed people and is planning to conquer the Earth. And she's got to deal with the situation. Then she's got to understand who she is and where she's got to pick herself back up again. And all this is going on. You have these great superhero stories where, Invincible handles him a little bit differently than his father did. Differently than other heroes would, because again, this is a young kid who's just getting into the groove of this, getting into the the vibe of it. I love the sequence where they had this alien who periodically was coming to Earth, and Omni-Man would go out there, beat the crud out of him, and the guy would run off and leave. Well, he sends his son to deal with the guy one time, saying, "Hey, he's tough, but you can handle him." Well, the kid handles it with a completely different way. He starts talking to the guy, going, "Hey, why are you attacking us? What the heck are you gain out of this?" And turns out this alien who's coming in and invading, quote unquote, invading Earth, isn't actually invading. He's part of this global initiative that tests and rates and deals with planetary champions. And he thought he was going to a different planet. He didn't know he was going to Earth. He thought he was going to Urith. So he thinks he's going over to this other place. It's like, oh my God, I've been going to the wrong place. Hey, sorry about that. I got to go over there and check in. And it was just this hysterical sequence that you get this hero who deals with the situation completely different than, how you would see a normal, quote unquote, normal superhero would deal with it. And that's part of the thing I love about this story, is that they're handling, the superhero genre a little bit differently. You still get some classic da-da-da and some really great superhero moments, but you get some light comedy. You get some of these moments, and then you get this massive smack in the face, dark, oh my God moments. and it's just this great blend of this, swerve and just, whirlwind that goes through that really has me enjoying this series and just saying, if you haven't picked up Invincible, pick up a trade, pick up some individual issues. As I said, I read the Omni collection, which has a bunch of stuff thrown together, but just, you give it a taste and you're going to be hooked into this, just because this is just a great superhero person. This is an absolute just joy for me, and I'm so glad I'm now into this. I'm going to start picking up volume 3. I'm going to continue on, and I'll probably stick with it in the Omni collection just because I'm a completist. If I got 1 and 2, I'm going to have 3, 4, etc.
Can I ask a question? And I want to do this because I know why you're kind of skirting what you are. Did you get into somebody's backstory? Is that the smack you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Wasn't that cool?
Yes.
Yeah, that was woo. I didn't see that coming. That's a great. It's such a good. I'm glad you're digging it. That was one that I did get that for you. I got the first 2 volumes for you, and it was one of the things that I was looking for a gift to get you. And Freddie had mentioned it on the show, and that was what made me realize that you had never read it. I hinted at you, do you have any of this and all that? And I ended up grabbing you the first 2 volumes. Those volumes, I got to say, when Image collects those, and they do the same thing with the equally unique Walking Dead hardcovers, their collected editions, I think, are just really spectacular. The Invincible ones in particular, because I have those volumes as well. The amount of extras that are in there, it really feels like a special volume that you get. And as a fan who really likes the behind-the-scenes stuff, that's really the way. If you haven't been reading Invincible, you should get those Ultimate collections, because they keep putting them out, and it's really a special way to read a book. I'm glad you dig those. That's really awesome.
God, yeah.
Well, Jim, do you have anything else? I think
that's about it.
Yeah.
We are Crystal Men from Mercury. We have no quarrel with you.
Once again, sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Be sure to jump by DCB Service this week to check out the amazing pre-orders for February. Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out again the Invincible Ultimate Collection, which is $34.99 regularly, 45% off, only $19.24. Saga, $9.99 regularly, 45% off, $5.49. Jennifer Blood by Garth Ennis, Volume 1, the trade paperback, $19.99 regularly, 30% off, only $13.99. Love and Capes by Tom Zoller, $19.99 regularly, 30% off, only $13.99. Harbinger, Volume 1, Omega Rising, 128 pages, $9.99 regularly, 30% off, only $6.99. And I want to say that I didn't shout out on the site for either the Marvel books because they aren't available yet. They're that new. So in the case of All New X-Men, it just hit 6 issues, so the trade isn't out yet for me to solicit. But I do want to shout out that and, of course, Superior Spider-Man, which is 2 issues in, as wonderful books to try out. And I want to thank InStockTrades.com and DCVService.com for continuing to support our show. James, our next episode, we are jumping back to the DC Universe, and we are going super green. We're going to be joined by longtime friend of the show, Myron Rumsey, as we discuss everything that's going on in the Green Lantern books right now, including Rise of the Third Army. So, really, really cool stuff to be discussing. Actually, all of the current stuff that's happening in the Green Lantern. There's a lot going on in the Green Lantern books. Can't wait to talk about that. So we will see everyone soon.
Bye.
Flying through space and time, 1,000 different lifetimes. Faded for love and flaws and incredibly clear sightlines. Swinging your mace around, such a practical outlook. Helping the JSA and occasionally supporting your own book. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see. Hawkman, your plan. What you do to me, Hawkman. The villains are closing in, be they Thanin Guard or Egyptian. Working so hard to thwart you and Hawkgirl's mission. The odds are not on your side, and danger seems to stack up. Things would be so much easier if you would just call for backup. Hawkman, Hawkman, eagle eyes can't see your plan.